So I'm sure a lot of you guys heard what happened in Chicago at the female rapper Mellow Buck's album release party when 18 people in total were hit, most of them females, and 5 people altogether ended up being deceased. Now, there's multiple things that led to something like this happening, and we're not going to tie this back to just one singular gang feud, but it's pretty obvious that something like this just doesn't happen at random. This was clearly a targeted attack, and it's part of something that's been going on for a while: women involved with gang business. Now, even if you're not that familiar with Chicago, you know the city's gang history, and women being a part of gangs is definitely not something new. In fact, it's probably been going on since the 70s. And I'm not sure if people still think like this today, but I do remember at one time there was a myth that women and girls are spared. But that's just not true whenever you involve with any type of gang business, even mob business, as things like this happen outside of the United States all the time. I'm sure you guys have seen women in the cartel videos, and even in Canada. As I covered in a video not too long ago, a woman named Claudia Iacono was married to the son of a known mobster in Canada, and she owned a beauty salon, and I'm not sure what exactly her involvement was in this mob, but possibly due to the family ties of her husband, she ended up being assassinated outside of the salon that she owned. But in Chicago specifically, especially within the last 10 years, women have definitely not been getting spared. According to the Chicago police, as of July 4th, 2025, 31 women had already been killed in Chicago, with most of them being anywhere from 20 to 30 years old. Now, just growing up on the South Side, I've seen a lot of girls chase after men who were involved in gangs. This is not nothing new, this happens all over the world. And I can forgive them for being young, as I saw most of this when I was in high school, but all of this comes with one thing. In Chicago, at least I know for sure, that a lot of men with a target on their back can't even take their girl out to eat because they'll both end up dead. I've been all around the country. I've even been to the Virgin Islands and Mexico. One thing that I've never seen is a shooter hop out a car and ask the woman what was her affiliation with a gang before he started blasting. Now, I admit, it might have been a little bit different back in my day. When I was in high school in the early 2010s, I remember being in the middle of a giant brawl between several cliques on the low end of Chicago, which is the South Side and the lower numbers. And as I mentioned before, like most cities, the bus in Chicago has an off switch where the bus can be disabled and the driver won't even be able to restart it. But right before this one brawl took place my freshman year, one of the guys in the back did manage to say, "Can all of the women and children step off the bus?" Even though we were all technically children. But he at least wanted the women to get off the bus before hands started being thrown. Because back then, at least, we used to say something called stand in a woman's place. It was very distasteful 10 to 15 years ago in Chicago to see a woman gangbanging. Yeah, we saw plenty of girls with gangbanging boyfriends, but to see a woman throwing up gang signs or representing any clique just looked like a suicide mission. For one, let's go over basic biology. Do you know how many times my feet have saved me in Chicago? One thing a woman is not gonna ever do is outrun a man. And that's just a fact. It don't matter how fast you are. I ran track in high school and college, and the fastest girl had nothing on basically every guy on the team. One well-known female in Chicago that was involved in gangs is of course K.I., as she even got an A&E documentary. Now, it's no secret that she was killed by King Von. And the internet and A&E depict her as being some kind of assassin that's having 17 bodies, but that's not true. This was a war going on in her era between multiple different hoods. So to say that she took credit for at least half of all the murders is crazy. Yeah, she might have used a gun, she might have even shot it at somebody, but to say that she was some kind of serial killer is outrageous. One thing that's for sure, whenever she did get caught, she was on the block with several men. Now, despite the fact that multiple shooters popped out of her cut, why was she the only one that died? You got people that was at the scene that admitted that they ran away and that's how they escaped. But a little girl trying to run away from multiple men shooting, it's just not gonna happen. Back when I was a sophomore at Simeon was having a basketball game against their main rival, Morgan Park. It attracted kids from high schools all over the city, and it wasn't uncommon for a fight or a shooting to break out after or before either a basketball or a football game back in those days. And there had been tension all through the game, but after the game in the parking lot, apparently a fight broke out and somebody ended up getting shot. And some little freshman girl named Daisy, I'll never forget the name because the name did not match the attitude, she started posting on social media basically mocking this guy that died, even though she didn't know who he was, but doing it as some sort of a twisted school pride, because she would make jokes that Simeon had shot at an op and made his body fall, which was a reference to a song. And it was pretty disturbing. And another example is I knew a girl that went to this high school called Perspectives, and after school one day, she had gotten into an argument with a gang member, and it got pretty heated until she ended up disrespecting one of his dead homies. And he smacked her so hard that the side of her face was blue. But this is a lot different than what's going on today, as it's not that uncommon to find women in alleys. Women have gotten shot at block parties, birthday parties, any type of event you can think of. And more recently, this album release party in one of the safest neighborhoods in Chicago.
I've been having look. Yeah.
But as a woman, especially one from the city, you have to be wise enough to know that hanging with certain crowds is more likely to get you killed. With this whole Mellow Buck situation, they say that some of the guys she's associated with in Drench Gang have been mocking a guy named Drills who was killed. Now when it comes to mocking the dead friend of a group of people with guns, when they come to take revenge, they're not gonna stop and ask questions. Because to them, it doesn't matter if they hit you or somebody that you know, because either way, it's gonna hurt you. And that's what gangbanging is in Chicago. People trying to make people feel as hurt as they are. It's not about a gang, a territory, drugs, none of that. And the fact that the police, even though they've gotten better, have been known historically in Chicago to not be able to solve many of the homicides, some of these guys are way more comfortable with collateral, like women being hit in situations like this, because they know they probably still won't get caught. But what shocks me is this is nothing new. So when women act like something like this can't happen to them, I'm very confused. I remember when I was in 8th grade, by the time freshman year was about to come around, there was a girl I graduated with that already had 2 dead boyfriends. 2 dead boyfriends by age 15. This is a tragedy. Yeah. Could it have been avoided? Of course, at least for her. I had a neighbor. She lived around the corner from me. She was one of those girls that had a baby as soon as she got to high school. But again, by sophomore year, the guy she had a kid with ended up dying. Having a baby and then losing the father of that child all before you turn 17 is crazy. That's just the reality of when you messing with people that's living that life. A lot of these guys don't expect to make it to 40. I have a friend who watched his father be killed by his cousin, and in high school he told me that he didn't expect to live to 40. But not just 40, he probably didn't even expect to make it to 25. There was a guy on the low end who was talking to a girl, but when somebody pulled up and started shooting, he pushed her to the ground and ran out the way. When you associating with somebody like that, man, as a woman, you can't expect that your life will ever be spared or saved. You're just in too much of a vulnerable state. Most women are not moving around the city like men. Even men that don't gangbang still have to move around Chicago in a certain way and watch their surroundings. And again, I must stress, this is not just an unorganized crime. And aside from the woman who was the daughter-in-law of a mobster that was gunned down outside of her salon, a man named Cosimo Camiso and his girlfriend were both gunned down in a quiet residential area in Canada simply because of the mob ties the man had. Even though many that knew him would say that he was a reputable businessman, sometimes just who you associated with as a man or a woman can mean the end of your life. And this woman he was messing with was apparently a city worker, so she likely had no ties to the mob at all outside of her boyfriend. But regardless, when the shooters popped out, they both died. And today in Chicago, even though the homicide rate has gone down, the homicides that do take place are a little bit more brutal. You have girls getting shot in front of their high school, girls getting left in the doorway of their apartment buildings. Some very vicious things that I've read over the past couple years, and that have even happened to people associated with people I know, including family. You are already in enough danger walking around the city as a woman, whether you alone or in a crowd. But to add more danger to this by associating with gang members is crazy. But I just wanted to vent about that, because I've been seeing it too much in Chicago lately. And like I said, it's been becoming a trend over the last 10 years. But in the future, everybody just needs to be smarter and be more careful with the company they keep. If you're hanging around a bunch of men who act like they don't care if they live or die, because that's what a lot of them are doing, acting. They say they okay with dying until a shooter pops out. And I guarantee, if you walk into a group of gang members and tell them to raise their hand if they want to die right now, ain't nobody hand gonna go up. But if you hang around a group of guys that want to pretend to be this careless, can't be surprised when something happens to you. But thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.